It's Wednesday, and that means we're going to be learning a little bit more English. The first thing that we're going to look at is, of course, our homework from last week, which one or two of you have emailed me in the answers, and you should be able to see on to the right of me here the sentences that we looked at. So we had 3 sentences that we looked at. The first one was, "Please don't tell anyone," Alison whispered loudly. Number 2 was, "Colin had to shout to his friend because they were in the library." And number 3, "I hate the rain," screamed the man in a low voice. Now what we've been looking at last week was strong verbs, and we said that when we talk about strong verbs, what we mean are verbs which hold lots of information. Okay, so that means instead of, for example, using the verb to say, or in the past said, we might use different verbs, like the verbs that you can see here, like whisper. So for example, I could say Sarah spoke quietly, or Sarah whispered. Okay, so the verb whisper by itself tells us that words are coming out of someone's mouth, but also tells us that what is being said in a very quiet voice. So the verb whisper gives us lots of information. Now the problem with the sentences that we have on the board, as I mentioned, is that I've used the wrong verbs in each of these sentences, and I wanted you to think about why that is. Okay, so for the first sentence what we have is, "Please don't tell anyone," Alison whispered loudly. Now the problem with this is, of course, that whispered means to say something in a quiet voice, and loudly is the opposite of that. So they're not really going to work together. Unless you're trying to be really funny or sarcastic, it doesn't really work together in that sentence. It doesn't make any sense. It's hard to imagine how Alison sounds. So it would probably be better to replace the word whispered with something like shouted even. So, Alison is shouting at someone who's leaving, "Please don't tell anyone," Alison shouted loudly. And that might make more sense. So it's really about thinking about what these sentences are trying to say. How do you imagine this dialogue happening if you were watching a movie, for example? What is Alison doing at this point? And the verbs and the words that you use need to reflect that. Okay, so we'll come to the second sentence. The second sentence was, "Colin had to shout to his friend because they were in the library." Now again, what's the problem here? We have the verb shout, which we've just said in sentence 1 means to say something in a louder voice. But where are we? We're in the library. Now of course, if you've ever been to a library, you will know that in a library everyone has to be because there are lots of people reading or studying. It's a very quiet place to be. So Colin, of course, would get into a lot of trouble if he was shouting at someone in the library. So instead of shout, the other verb that we could pop in here might be the verb from sentence 1. So Colin had to whisper to his friend because they were in the library, and that's going to work much, much better because of where Colin is. Okay, so in the first sentence we had the word loudly, which was helping us to decide the right verb. In the second sentence we have this situation, where are we, and we're in the library, and we use the information that we know about the library to help us to pick the right verb. Okay, the third one then, the last sentence that we had for homework was, "I hate the rain," screamed the man in a low voice. Now again, we've got 2 pieces of information which are helping us. We've got the verb screamed, okay, and we've got the phrase "in a low voice." Okay. Now again, to scream, if you look that up in the dictionary, what it will tell you is it's something that's done in usually a high voice because of fear or annoyance. Last week I think we had, was it Joanne or somebody was screaming because their boat was leaving the shore and they couldn't swim. So here, to scream is to proclaim or to shout something very loudly in a high voice because of fear or some other emotion. But of course we're not in a high voice, we're using a low voice. This man is doing something in a low voice. So scream doesn't work because it doesn't work with low, what would that sound like? They don't work together. So instead of scream, there are lots of things. Again, for each of these sentences, there are lots of verbs which will work. I'm just giving you one example of each. Here, what is he doing? If he's saying, I hate the rain, he's complaining. So we could say, I hate the rain, complained the man in a low voice, or grumbled the man in a low voice, or mumbled the man in a low voice. And again, each of those verbs is going to take their own meaning along with it. The verb mumble, for example, means to complain in a very low voice, sort of like under your breath, as if you were talking to yourself or you didn't want other people to hear you. To complain might be it's in a low voice, but he might want people to hear. So again, each verb is going to have something slightly different about it, takes a different flavour to the sentence, and it's up to you as the author, as the writer or the speaker, to decide what exact message do you want to give across. How do you decide this? It's all through practice, it's all through experience, and it's about knowing as many different verbs, as many different words as possible, so that you can choose, so that you don't just have a small amount of words to work from. What you want is a huge range of language so that you can make decisions about how you paint the picture that you're trying to put across to other people. All right, so that was the homework. What we're going to do now is we're going to move on to our next kind of mini topic, and the next mini topic is something called adjectives. And I said I was going to explain, or you were going to find out for this week, what an adjective is. Now, the best way for me to explain what adjective is to give you a very simple sentence. Okay, so from week 1, hopefully you'll recognise he is the person in my sentence, and drives therefore is the verb. Okay, so this is going to be the verb. Remember, that is the heart of your sentence. That tells us what is happening. And we've got the little s on the end of this because, of course, we're talking about he. So remember, in the present simple in English, he, she, or it, you're going to add an s to the end of your verb. But we're not going to stop with verbs anymore. We're going to extend this sentence and have a look at the other types of words that we've got. So he drives a fast car. Okay, so that is our sentence that we have now. He drives a fast car. Now, I could have just written he drives a car, and you would understand in your head the information that I'm giving you. He drives a car. You know that there is a person sitting in a car. But can you imagine what that car looks like? No, because I haven't given you any more information. Now, just to tell you, the word car, and we will look at these next week, is something called a noun. And noun just means that it's the name of a person or a thing. So car is our noun. And the word that's giving us more information about our noun is fast. Okay, so fast is our adjective. Okay. And as I said, that is what we're going to be talking about this week, is adjectives. So an adjective is really a describing word. Just like our strong verbs help us to paint a picture, adjectives also help to paint pictures because they give us more information about nouns. They give us description, they describe. So now in your head, possibly if you're thinking about he drives a fast car, you might have a little bit more information about what that car might look like. So maybe you might imagine a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or something instead of just a neutral car. Okay, so it's giving us a little bit more information. Other words you might add to describe the car might be things like colours. So he's driving a fast red car. And again, red would be another adjective because it's giving you more information about your noun. All right, now another adjective that we're going to look at is one of my least favourite adjectives, and it is the adjective nice. Now, nice is one of the laziest adjectives in the entire of the English language, and that's because it doesn't really do very much. Okay. So I'm going to give you some example sentences now, and we'll put them up here on the board so that you can see them and have a think about the word nice and what it's doing in that sentence. So the first sentence that we have is, the food is nice. Okay? The food is nice. So think about what that means. What kind of picture do you have in your head from that sentence? Then we have, the teacher is nice. Again, it's the same adjective, giving us information about a teacher. The weather is nice. It's about the weather. So have a think about the adjective nice in all of those sentences. I mean, I think basically what we can say is the word nice is a positive word. It's telling us something positive, maybe something good about each of those sentences, but it's not really telling us very much more than that. Okay. Now what we can say is we can replace, there isn't just one word that means nice. There are lots and lots of different words that we can use instead of nice that actually most of the time are going to work a lot better. So if we look at the first one, we have the food is nice. Now what other words might you use instead of nice? We could use the food is delicious. The food is tasty. Okay, so both of those words will replace nice and will work really, really well with food. Those are specific to food. If we say the teacher is nice, what do we mean by that? And again, there's lots of different things that you could mean if you were talking about this, but we could use something like kind, or generous, or helpful. Again, it depends what it is that you're thinking. But as you can see, helpful, kind, those give us really more information about how the teacher is nice. What does that mean when you say the teacher is nice? So does she help you? Does she, bring buns to school? What does it actually mean? So those words are better suited to this sentence than the word nice, which doesn't really do a lot. And the last sentence is the weather is nice. And what does that mean? What does nice mean to you when we're talking about weather? Does that mean that it's 30 degrees? Is it hot? Do you prefer it when it's a little bit more mild? So the weather is very mild. It's very warm. It's very hot. It's very sunny. What is it exactly that you're trying to say? How is the weather nice? So it's about trying to use words, trying to use adjectives that paint a better picture, that aren't just nice, which just means something positive, but doesn't really give us any insight into what that actually means. Give us information about what it is you're describing. Now there are some words, as you can see in these cases, if we're talking about the weather, you might use warm. If we're talking about the teacher or a person, you might say kind. And if you're talking about food, you might say delicious. Now, those are very specific adjectives that you're using to replace nice. So you wouldn't really say delicious weather, for example. It doesn't work. But there are some adjectives that you can use to replace nice, which are very, very general. So, for example, the word lovely. We could have lovely food, a lovely person, and lovely weather. That works for everything. But again, as we said, delicious doesn't. So you really need to think about, you need to not just look at one word, not just look at the word nice by itself. You need to look at your whole sentence and sometimes your whole paragraph and your whole story to have a think about what is it that I'm describing, what am I trying to give more information about, and what is it that I want to say about that thing? What picture do I want to paint? And that's really very important. Okay, so what I'd like you to do for next week is we're going to think about this word nice, and what I'd like you to try and do is to write 5 sentences using the word nice, and then the same 5 sentences and find different adjectives that you can use instead. So, to give you an example, if I had, I'll just use the one that we've just looked at. So your sentence number 1 might be, the weather is nice. And what you're going to do then is replace nice. So you write it again, the weather is warm. So in this case, warm is the adjective that you're using instead of nice. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is to create 5 of those. You can't use this one either, that's mine. So try and create another 5 sentences where the original word would be nice, and you're going to repeat the sentence but to use a different adjective. Okay. Now here's a tip. There is, of course, you can kind of pick adjectives out of your head, but if you're not sure, there's a great book called a thesaurus. Okay. Now, if you have one of these at home, that's brilliant. All you need to do is to look up the word nice in your thesaurus. It kind of looks a bit like a dictionary, but instead of giving you the meaning of words, it gives you all of the words which mean the same as that word. So if you looked up nice in a thesaurus, it would give you a very long list of words that you can use instead of nice. So it's really, really useful for this exercise. If you don't have a thesaurus in your house, that's totally fine. You can, of course, just use the internet. So you just go to thesaurus.com, which is a really cool website. Again, here all you need to do is to type in the word nice into the search box on this website and press enter, and it will give you lots and lots of words that mean the same as nice that you can use for this homework exercise, or that you can start to use in your speaking or your writing to make it more interesting. Again, what we're thinking about here, as we said last week when we were looking at that Monet picture, was about creating colours with words so that your writing and your speech can be a little bit more interesting.